Hi, my first question is for Andy, James, and Sindhu. Each of you are leaders in organizations of international repute with a global presence with thousands of employees. While it must be a difficult task to take note of the needs of all your employees, can you please throw some light on what was your aha moment or incident which made you a champion of the cause of inclusion and diversity?
Sure, I'll go first. Maybe before I do, I'm sitting up here, but I'm only here because of the amazing work that the Allegis team has done. So if I could ask them to stand up, I'd really like to give them a round of applause. They've been unbelievable. And they'll fit pretty prominently into my answer. So probably about 10 years ago, we were offered an opportunity to look at an acquisition of a company called Getting Hired. And Getting Hired was a company really focused on how do we make sure that underserved populations and people with disabilities have opportunities in the United States. And I actually spearheaded that acquisition, and I'd love to say that was an aha moment, but it really wasn't. It felt like a good thing to do. It felt like probably the right thing from a CSR perspective, and fit with our mission. So I was proud of it, but in hindsight, it probably was a little more check the box than really an aha moment. And then as I continued in my journey, I think I realized a few years ago that our purpose has always been about creating opportunity, and we were maybe not positioned from a cultural perspective to do that to the level we needed to. We were not creating an environment where everybody's best self was showing up every day. There wasn't the authentic self-commitment that I felt we needed, and it was a business imperative. It was much more about how do we make sure we're nimble, we're getting the best ideas, and we're getting the best out of all of our team. And so I really started to promote the idea that we need inclusion to be a part of our value system. And again, I'd love to tell you there was a big aha moment, but what's been my aha has probably been more this week than really anything that happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And it's from the people who stood up right there, and it's been from all of you for the last 5 hours. I think I had understood what we needed to do at a macro level, but I don't think I really understood what was possible until I've spent the last 5 days with the team sharing unbelievable stories about what's possible and what truly enabling everyone means and what it means to bring your authentic self to work. So I hope to get to share some of those stories, but I also want to leave some time. But I've had no fewer than 50 aha moments, many of them today, based on all of what you've already shared.
Great. Thanks, Andy, and thanks, Asha. So at JP Morgan in the Autism at Work program there, I say there have been some micro and macro aha moments, and I won't go through them all. But early on, Torkel Sonet, who's in the room, approached us with the concept of employing people with autism and talking about the advantage. And we heard Joe talk earlier about some advantages with Greta and her autism being a superpower. And so we were intrigued by that idea, and it was the first light bulb that went off in our head to really think of this is a talent premise. It's not to be done for charity, right? And that was the first piecing together. It progressed from there into some more moderate, let's say, aha moments, but some of them were pretty dramatic, and they were business results by the people on the spectrum we had hired, where they were 48, 90%, 140% higher in productivity and quality against their typical peers doing exactly the same work, measured at exactly the same point in time. So we call that a good apples-to-apples comparison. And then, those are strong metrics. Those are strong aha moments that we can prove mathematically, but we can never ignore the less metric and more anecdotal evidence that we see now in the community of people on the spectrum, the individuals. I've lost count of the number of people who have gotten their driver's license for the first time, or have moved away from home for the first time, or an anxious person who can't speak without quivering, leading a meeting every day. So that newfound sense of independence, interactive ability, developing relationships, people have boyfriends and girlfriends now for the first time in their lives. These are good, not metrically provable, but possibly more important, that people are feeling belonging, not just invited. And there's a difference. Yeah?
Thanks, Asha. First of all, great honor to be here, and thanks to Firoz for driving such an amazing cause. I think I've had lots of aha moments just yesterday and today. I mean, it's incredible, the amount of goosebump moments that I've had. Thank you for this wonderful experience. I think if I just reflect back on my biggest aha moment that started already back when I was in 8th grade, actually, even before my corporate life started. I was narrating this story last evening at the Friends Raising event, and just this whole, I didn't know about the term inclusion, but the feeling of being included. I still remember it was, like I said, in 8th grade, my parents asked me to move schools. So I was in a convent, loved my school, loved my teachers, loved my friends, and like many of you know, a lot of focus on those subjects that get you excellent marks, and I was asked to change schools because I could take Sanskrit as a language. And that was the reason to change schools, and I still remember this moment when I stood in front of my new class in the new school, and staring at this this classroom filled with boys and girls. I was in a girls-only school, so you could imagine my kind of moment back then, filled with kind of anxiety, and I hope I would make a friend. And the teacher said, just like it was a normal day for her, of course, and she said, who'd like to have Sindhu sit next to them? And everybody was like glaring back, and there was this little girl in the second row who raised her hands and said, I'd like to have her, and that was Lakshmi, my friend, until today. And I think that moment was really an aha moment that has stayed with me throughout my life until today. That feeling of inclusion and just being one of everybody, right? And I think that's so important, and I think you mentioned that as well. Why is it has to be something different, right? So I think that's important, and I'm so happy that today I can live that in my corporate life, because at SAP, and Asha, you're a living role model for somebody who's been recognized by a corporate like SAP. So at SAP, our purpose is really, I mean, we are a purpose-driven company, and we keep our employees and the society, the countries that we operate out of, and of course our customers at the core of everything we do, right? So having a purpose-driven focus helps us in all the work we do, and also for the kind of programs that we have with regards to making sure that everybody can bring their best self to work. Because I think as long as we can bring our best selves to work, we do our best for whatever be the area that you're contributing to. So I will be sharing a lot of the things. You must be wondering why I mentioned Asha. I'll come to that in a bit. But in general, I think it's been phenomenal aha moments since yesterday. And today, both my children are also here sharing those aha moments with me. So yeah, happy to be here.
They're either filming you or they're playing a video game. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy, James, and Sindhu, for answering the first question. We now move on to the second question. Okay, the second question is, there's ample research to show that a diverse and inclusive workplace benefits all. In fact, studies have shown that having an inclusive workplace, especially cognitive diversity, increases innovation at the workplace and sets a company apart. However, many organizations have not yet fully opened to the idea of hiring persons with disabilities, and for some that do, it becomes a tick in the box exercise. as leaders of organizations who are role models for inclusive workplaces, what would you say to break this attitudinal barrier of many employees?
Maybe I can start, Asha. Like I said, at SAP, we've always been a very purpose-driven company, and now, like, what is important, and I think super critical, is like I mentioned, making sure that everybody getting their best self to work. And if you just look at any kind of team, so well-functioning teams, you take a team, you kind of dissect it, and almost 200% with results, you can see that the best teams with the best results are when you have the most diverse constellation. And when I say diverse, it can be diversity in terms of race or nationality, color, sex, orientation of gender. It can be any kind of disabilities or abilities. And if you, I mean, not always we are able to have teams which have all the kind of differences, but and it's proven, and we've seen that also at SAP, every time you have a very diverse team, the kind of output that the team produces is also phenomenal. And I think a lot has to do with also the kind of awareness that we have to get across, because sometimes it's also easy to just sit around in an area where you just have people just walk across the room and you can talk to them and get to a kind of a conclusion on whatever you wanted to achieve. But I think if you bring in the different perspectives and if you bring in the totally different point of view, I mean, for us as a corporate, where we provide solutions for countries, more than 180 countries. So think about what kind of perspectives we have to bring into account when you build solutions for people sitting in totally different parts of the world. So it's almost no doubt, and it's almost like a no-brainer if you ask me, that having a different perspective, different kind of thought processes, different kind of even upbringing and what influenced you through your journey, that kind of helps you look at a problem statement or look at solutions in which you want to improve a customer's life or the society you're working in, or anything for that matter. You bring in different perspectives, and it's the collective power of this that really contributes to some of those really breakthrough ideas that we have seen. Taking an example, so when we talk about our platform strategy, something that I'm truly passionate about, and people who know me know that I talk about it a lot. But now if you put together different views of partners coming in, and I'm just seeing a lot of people here sitting on wheelchairs. So one solution that we built together with a partner, Accenture actually, is how can we make sure that we embed also different technologies, so sensors in the wheelchair that allows for also comfort in how you sit, and also helps in terms of how do you use your limbs effectively. And again, if it's not for the diverse thought process of bringing together different people with different kinds of backgrounds, but then using the same technology to kind of address a totally different use case. And that's something which I think is very important, and where you've seen phenomenal results of how people can benefit from some of these thought processes put together. And I'm sure you have more such examples, James and Andrew.
Absolutely, but that was great in terms of the depth with which you're thinking about it. From our standpoint, I think philosophically we have a value system in place that certainly embraces different types of diversity beyond gender and race, but into experiential cognitive diversity. The question becomes, how do you then personify that into a set of behaviors that everyone's belonging and participating? And for us, it comes through a lot of work with assistive technology to make sure everyone has equal ability to do the same job. When it comes to employment, however, a little bit different. We always say, and it may be startling at first when I say this, we don't have jobs for, let's say, autistic people or blind people. We have jobs for talented people who happen to be blind or autistic or female or black, Latino, Hispanic, or Asian. The reason we do that is we believe If we were to set aside a portion of jobs, it then transitions into being charitable instead of being really driven at helping a person succeed, helping the business succeed. Those things come together. And it keeps you, I think, in a healthier place that keeps psychologically that inclusive mindset in place versus us perhaps looking at somebody that was a quota fill as something else and therefore a chasm that wasn't crossed. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
So that's just the philosophy we have. Now, do we do it perfectly every time? Perhaps not. But that's what we're really trying to aim to, that we equip people with what they need, we bring them in for the right reason, we keep the big us as being everyone, and then we align to those value behaviors I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Love everything that both of you shared, so I won't maybe cover the same ground. I think I'll share, maybe just adding to that, what I've seen with our team here is when you talk about attitudinal shifts, it's not education and training, it's experiences. And what I've seen our team do is just have a real bias for action. They could have spent a lot of time trying to convince me what they needed to do, or they could have talked about policies or all kinds of things that needed to happen first. But what they did was, as you said, they found really talented people who could do amazing things for us, brought them in, and had them teach us a lot. And I think through that experience, it was a huge impact on more and more people saying, wow, why am I not doing that? I'm not attracting all of the talented people that are out there. And now there's a tipping point that's been reached, and there's just a different culture in the way our India team acts and behaves and embraces inclusion. And I really put it to their willingness to take action, declare intent, and then work through some of the challenges. But they've been amazing, and those have been a lot of my aha moments this week.
Thank you, Andy, James, and Sindhu. We now move on to the third question. Okay, this question is for James. Through the Autism at Work program at JP Morgan Chase, you have established partnerships with organizations that have more experience in working with individuals with autism spectrum disorder. Specifically, JP Morgan Chase is learning to look beyond the traditional interview process to find highly qualified employees and is working closely with senior leaders across the firm to identify roles that would benefit from the talents of ASD adults. Can you please shed some light on the hiring program at JP Morgan Chase and how it is different from the traditional interview process?
Sure. Thanks, Asha. So one of the first things we realized, or we were educated to, was that traditional interviewing techniques will not amplify what many people on the autism spectrum are good or great at. And like most companies, we were looking for strong eye contact, just the right length of answer, firm handshake, and we often walked away hiring great extroverts, but we lost the great Java programmer, or the SQL person, or the quant analyst. And so again, Torkel and others educated us on different ways of interviewing. And one thing we've done is we've adjusted our interview process for people on the spectrum. And we accommodate it differently for people of all different abilities as well. But with autism, probably it's the most significant change. First, we allow you to bring an advocate to the interview. Not many people take us up on that offer. We never do a panel interview. The first thing we often do is ask, in the case of a Java developer, we send an email of 4 questions so that the first interaction is truly evaluating a person's core competency. We don't have the interviewer turned off by low eye contact in a face-to-face or by slow answers in a phone call. We just want to get to know whether you're a Java expert. If you get to a face-to-face interview, we'll ask questions like, what did you do at your last job, or what do you do at your current job, rather than what would you do, which is really an abstract academic exercise, and one that cannot be supported by evidence, by the way, right? What did you do, what do you do, can be evidence-based. So those are some of the things that we try to do differently. And then we, of course, train anyone interviewing on some general things about autism, about different communication styles, about what to expect, about how to get somebody back on track. And these are all things that we continue to learn as you know, managers, recruiters. And I'll tell you, to the point I made about what would you do, what do you do, that's a great question for anybody. That is a better question than what would you do, unless you're applying to be a fortune teller. And then, of course, you should probably answer that question.
Thank you, James, for answering the question.
Thank you.
The next question is for Andy. Andy, many employers see the value in growing their diversity and inclusion efforts, but they often underestimate the strong experience and relationships required to build successful programs. Given Allegis' success in building a strong inclusion program to hire persons with disabilities, including persons with profound disabilities, can you please share some specific anecdotes or stories of successes and failures of building an inclusive workplace at Allegis?
Sure, Asha. I think let me start when you say successes and failures. I think my favorite quote of all time comes from Nelson Mandela, and he says, "I never lose. I either win or I learn." And I think while some might call them failures, I think we've had a lot of learnings and we've had a lot of winning, which has been pretty amazing. So. Let me tell a couple. Gokul, I believe, is here. I said we had a bias for action, and we said, hey, let's find some really talented people. Gokul did not have an HR background, had not had a job, but somebody saw in him the opportunity to be a great recruiter. He had an engineering degree, and said, hey, I think he's going to be pretty good. So he came on board. And we have pretty tough standards around what kind of metrics you have to hit. And for 8 months, Gokul didn't have a start. And that's our real metric, is are you placing people at clients? And that's not uncommon. We have recruiters who often take a little while to get up to speed. But I suspect that part of that was Gokul was learning the job. Part of that was we were learning how to best coach and manage Gokul. And I think he was teaching us throughout that experience that, hey, I don't want you to help me in certain ways. I need to struggle. I need to get better. And Gokul got better. And I think fast forward to now, he's been our top performing recruiter. He has been promoted 3 times. I had a conversation with him a few days ago, and he's now in a client-facing role, which means he's leaving the office to go talk to clients and understand their needs and their requirements. And he wanted to know, hey, what's possible? What's next? And to me, you know, he is such an inspiring example of somebody who's taught us a lot about not assuming anything, not imposing any limits, but listening, learning. So that would be one. And I know we're quick on time. Maybe I'll tell one other that I just heard this morning that had me puff out my chest a little bit. I was talking to another recruiter who was looking to place somebody. I cannot remember the exact scenario, but was going through some testing and did not score very well on the test. And this was a person with a disability. But this recruiter, rather than saying, hey, the candidate doesn't want him for this, called the manager and said, I have somebody who's great, and here's what I see. Here are the strengths. And the manager said, hey, let me think about that. I think I have another role that would fit. And when I talk about aha moments and the opportunity we have to impact, it's not just what's happening inside of Allegis, but it's how do we do that across our tens of thousands of customers with our hundreds of thousands of candidates. So a couple stories that I'll leave here with a very different understanding of what's possible. So really, really excited and inspired.
Thank you, Andy. That was very inspirational. The next question is for Sindhu. SAP's groundbreaking Autism at Work program was launched in 2013. The program leverages the unique abilities and perspectives of people with autism to foster innovation. Can you please share some success stories of employees in SAP who have been inducted through the program? Is SAP open to hiring persons with all types of disabilities?
Great question, Asha. And the start of the autism at work at SAP was none other than Feroz. Back in 2013, you can see the kind of passion and drive that he brings. I mean, the amount of energy and inspiration he has for people every day is something that is infectious. I can only say that almost every day he's connecting me to people and he said, this is the person you need to meet and take some of the things forward. So back then, it was this passionate Feroz who started off the Autism at Work program at SAP, Asha. And talking about success stories, here you are. You are one of the first employees that we hired back then, and here she is.
Thank you, Sindhu.
And I don't think I need to speak about the success here. Asha is here sitting and talking to all of us, but behind what all Asha does, she's also a very avid writer, and she helps us make sure that we are on track on the software, because she's also looking into controls of quality controls. She's also writing a lot around usage of our software too. So, and she's won so many awards, right? So in that sense, I think you're a perfect role model for somebody who's made it and who really lives the talk, because you go out there. I mean, last Friday, if you remember our conversation as well, so I took the chance to also meet with few of our colleagues at SAP here in India who have been hired as within the autism spectrum. And each story was so inspiring, each story in terms of also the impact not just for the person but also for the families who are behind the people who support them on a daily basis. Just today I met with a lot of the families who said, thank you so much for the work that SAP does and for the kind of inspiration that we drive forward. So many such success stories. We had Sreedhar earlier on today. Sreedhar is an avid artist. I mean, besides doing all the fantastic work at SAP, he's also spends his time. I mean, you've seen his creativity when you walk through the artwork. There he is, Sreedhar. And if you're looking to, I think Sreedhar, when I think people were quoting him as, where can I find your artwork? He always said, go to the Chitrakala Parishad, and there you will find it. But for those of you who are looking at, want to find some more of the art that Sreedhar has worked on, you can go to trsreedhar.com and you can look at all his artwork. So what I'm saying is, I mean, success stories are immense and we can talk a lot about it, but I think it's also important that we continue the efforts in terms of bringing the best self of each and every one of us. I mean, it's our absolute right, like Anu mentioned earlier on today as well. I mean, it's not something that you have to sympathize or ask for in terms of being accepted, but I think it's our absolute right. And I think as corporates, we all have a very strong responsibility, and we also have a huge opportunity to connect the dots between corporates, between governments, between the societies that we live in, and to kind of drive that forward. Because a lot of what we do is also based on how much people know and how much people can then take forward. I mean, if you know it, Asha, back at SAP, when we launched the Autism at Work program. I mean, now it's a much larger program, right? It's going across all the countries we operate in. Jose Velasco, who's also the champion behind this, now drives this forward. But what I wanted to say is also making sure that we have programs where we also create a multiplying effect. So like when you were hired, you had a buddy assigned to you, for example, right? And the buddy also got to understand what it means for Asha to get into the whole work process, getting to work, or for anybody else who needs to understand the rhythms, because there, and I think this kind of awareness is something that we can even build further, and I think I'd encourage all of you to also become multipliers, because each one going back even into your families, into your work, into the connections that you have, I think that's the kind of multiplying effect that we have in order to create even more success stories. Because finally it's the joint kind of coming together that really drives those kind of success stories. So I can sit here for the rest of the afternoon and talk about success stories, but I think you yourself speak a lot for a lot of the other examples that we have at SAP, Asha.
Thank you, Sindhu, for the wonderful answer and for all your support and encouragement. I really appreciate it. The next question is for all three of you, Andy, James, and Sindhu. SAP, JP Morgan, Chase, and Allegis are without a doubt on the dream list of employers for most people in the audience today. Can the three of you please share your top do's and don'ts for an interview with your respective organizations? Any of you can start.
You want me to start?
You want to start?
I'm trying to think. That's a really hard question. I don't know how I would, what my do's or don'ts would be. I think, though, honestly, the do answer is be honest. And often in this crowd, honesty means if you have a hidden disability, do you disclose it? And that's a personal choice. I can't advise you on that, but I would advise the do part of it is that you have to make that real personal analysis of, does it help you? Does it help you be your authentic self? And sometimes with a hidden disability, if it's anxiety, if it's ADHD, if it's any mental illness, if it's autism condition, sometimes telling people helps them understand a little bit more about you, and you get them past, let's say, your difference and into where you can help them. So honesty is the main heading of my answer, and then maybe some personal honesty if you think it's important for you getting the job. A don't is don't reach for something that's absolutely beyond your limit. Really try to be realistic in terms of where you want to enter that company. And I'd say another don't is don't take a job unless you feel you can do the job, but also connect with them in terms of their attitude around things like this, right? Around belonging, around inclusion, around giving back to community, around being a reflection of the communities that we serve as our customers.
Thank you, James.
So I won't repeat great advice from James. I won't repeat, but I maybe build on. I think oftentimes the dynamic is the employer picking you, but I think, as James said, you have to pick the employer as well. So do your research, do find out about the culture, and it's the same advice I give everyone. Prioritize culture and people over almost everything else. Passion, the work will find its way if you find a place where you can find your purpose, and that usually starts with culture and people. Do share your superpower and share your story. I think we want to understand what people have overcome, and I think grit is still one of the #1 determining factors of success. And then on the don't, I would agree with James's don't about the overreach, but I would also say don't stop, because no just means not yet. And that's, again, advice I would give everyone, but no means not yet. So.
Yeah,
Great.
I think both of you said it all. Just have to reflect on the same things. I mean, do learn about the culture that the organization truly stands for. I think the more people you talk to, you'll very quickly find that culture, what's kind of buzzing in the organization, right? And the beauty today is you also have a lot of social media and access to information. It's not like 10 years back where you had to really go and find that out individually. There's so much of information, but talk to people. There's nothing that can compensate talking to people. So that's an absolute do. Don't, I think sometimes we always also try to have a perfect match. And this is, I would say, give it a chance sometimes, because it's not always you're going to be a perfect match for the profile. You can always learn as long as you have a learning attitude, and I think you mentioned that. You can go for it, right? So that would be, besides all the don'ts that they talked about, sometimes you don't need to make sure that it's 100% fit. So if you think you can learn and get through it, you should go for it, right? That's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, James, and Sindhu, for the wonderful answers. The next question for all three of you is, for building a good career, one needs an enabling environment. Can you please describe the kind of accommodations, adjustments, support you provide for candidates, employees during the recruitment, onboarding, and ongoing employment stages? How do you educate managers and other colleagues in including all types of people, including people with different abilities? Any of you can go first.
Maybe I can go first, Asha. I think, like I said, awareness is so important, and no matter how much we say we are a purpose-driven company and that we stand for certain principles, we still cannot underestimate how much that continuity in how we keep educating and getting that awareness deeper into the organization is so important. Because, I mean, people come from different backgrounds, right? Not everybody just can kind of get in there and drive the change that you stand for. And so we deeply believe that this has to be a very consistent effort that happens, and this is also what we do. Every year we have deep knowledge sessions with our managers, with our employees, and it's not that you do it once and you're done, because there's so much of learning that we all acquire over a period of time, right? And it's so important that we get abreast of this, and so we have well-defined policies in place, how people have to go through and have to, I mean, right, it's not optional anymore. And that goes also back to the recruitment process. So for just taking one concrete example of recruiting people in the autism spectrum, the same kind of recruiting methods don't hold good. We have even a very elongated process that goes over several weeks, because it's over that period of time that we get to understand, like you said, what the person is really interested in working on, right? And it's not always coming out in the first conversation, or if you just go through your kind of usual process of how you would run through an interview. But again, this is not something that we think is, and this where we are also learning how we change how we recruit people in across, right? And so this learning is something where we are bringing it back into our normal HR processes. And so it's not like something very specific, but I think as an organization, having this culture of learning and being open is so important, and that translates, of course, into brilliant policies, which then kind of drives that forward. I also mentioned earlier on, every person who gets in with very specific disabilities, we also have a buddy program, and where the buddy is always working with the person, and also making sure that very special needs are also addressed. And then what the beauty that we see is not just helps the person, but the entire team very quickly, because everybody starts thinking that way. And so this whole awareness and learning and then putting policies in place that kind of foster that is very key.
Thank you, Sindhu. That was a very good answer.
Thank you. You know, it's such a big question, right? But it's also an employee's first view into how serious is a company about inclusion and about diversity. And so we take great care in terms of asking, when we first hear by email, let's say, asking an applicant, will you need any type of accommodation during the interview process? So we make it a very natural Here's our address, do you need anything? And we ask that of every candidate. And sometimes, people with visible disabilities will disclose before we even meet them. Sometimes they don't, but we're always equipped for that. We've gone through pain in terms of developing training material for all of our recruiters around diversity, around different types of interviewing techniques, about accommodations. And I think one of the most important things we do when the hiring manager is interviewing a candidate, he or she will ask, what can I give you to make you do your best work? And what we do there, it's an implied invitation to ask for an accommodation. We explicitly ask the same question, of course, but we don't presume that because you walked in and everything looked okay, that you don't have a need for assistive technology or an accommodation, right? Because we would miss a lot of things like PTSD, ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia, et cetera. And so those are some of the ways we're trying to, A, not be presumptuous, and B, try to set the stage for accommodations being a natural thing. And then we've got kind of white glove treatment to deliver the assistive technology, let's say, before an employee even starts work. So that's kind of a handful of the things.
Thank you, James,
Sure.
for the wonderful answer. What about you, Andy?
We do a lot of similar things. Maybe knowing we're up against time, I'll just hit it pretty quickly though, and maybe add, because I think we really share a lot of similar philosophies. When you walk into our lobby, when you walk into most lobbies, you see trophies or you see products. You actually, for our lobby, we have a Garce Center, and it's a room right off the lobby, and it's really where we're making sure that as we talk to clients or as we look inside, we've got the right technology, the right accommodation for different disabilities. And we've done lots of training. We've done a lot around different job specs. But I'd say above all that, I go back to what I said at the beginning. It's really been much more about intent, being really clear across the organization, empowering and trusting managers, and really, as James just said, asking great questions and being really good listeners, and recognizing that while we can do a lot of things to make sure that somebody is set up to succeed, we also don't know what we don't know, and we have to be great listeners. We have to trust our team members to figure it out, and I think that's probably been the most important ingredient for the great success that we've had.
Thank you, Andy. That was a very nice answer. We now come to an end of our corporate panel discussion. Let's give a hand for these three, for Andy, James, and Sindhu.